Booyah!
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Fringe. This is going to be a little bit of a different video because it's not just an opinion piece this time or anything that's currently going on in government, more of an explanation on the world of politics. A lot of people have asked on live streams, on many videos, what happened with your bid for mayor? Why did you drop out? Why are you not continuing forward with your run for the mayor's chair in Calgary? And I kind of wanted to clear up a few things and actually point to the darker side of politics and why the decision came on my end, and ultimately I decided to throw my hat out of the race. Before we start on that video, I just wanted to take a minute to remind everybody that this upcoming Saturday, November 2nd, from 7 to 9 p.m. over at Shanks South in Calgary. If you're in the Calgary area, myself and my wife, Mrs. Fringe, will be doing kind of like a goodbye. We're going to be selling some books, doing selfies, signing books, um, giving people a chance to kind of meet the Fringe before our move up to Spruce Grove. And it's going to be great. I hope to see everybody there. We're only there for the 2 hours. That's the only time slot we could really get figured out with Shanks or for our schedule. So again, I hope to see you all at that event. Again, Saturday, November 2nd from 7 to 9 p.m. if you're in the Calgary area. There's no designated area in the bar, but you'll see us when we're in there. I'm definitely a hard guy to miss. But yeah, we hope to see you guys there. Now, as Calgary is the topic here, one thing I wanted to address that, again, a lot of people have asked is why? Why did you drop out? Well, I often say that a lot of it came down to family decisions, family first. My wife, everybody knows that from the get-go, I had stated that as a family man and as a man with 3 children, my wife in particular was fed up, as well as myself, with the current state of the city in terms of children at risk, in terms of programs that are being offered in our city that are exposing children to sexuality that they shouldn't be exposed to at such a young age. My biggest problem was the spending that is going on in the city. When we look at the Green Line LRT spending, when we look at the horrendous issue that happened with our water over the summer and the rezoning issues, the list goes on and on with the failed policies of woke, failed Mayor Jody Gondek. But one of the counselors who I've often criticized, who's actually my counselor in Calgary, Dan McLean, spoke to him over the summer at Pierre Poilievre's and MP Holland's Stampede breakfast slash barbecue, excuse me, where everybody stood out. And I went there to give Pierre a copy of our newest book, Just Axe the Tax, which, again, if you haven't picked that up yet, it is a bestseller. You should go grab it over on Amazon. There is a link down below. But essentially, Dan talked to me about the same subject that is now being pushed in the Calgary Herald. And I'm going to get into the darker side of politics because it wasn't just Dan McLean. But I've often felt that Dan McLean, I mean, he's put himself out on a lot of news sites. He's sat down with a lot of reporters. I felt that he was putting himself into the spotlight quite a bit with the intention of running. I still believe that Dan McLean is trying to clear the deck, so to speak, so that he can run in next year's civic election. Part of the problem I've had from day one is, how do you trust a politician? How do you know that a politician has the best interests in your city, in your province, in your country, when we see the destructive behavior of those politicians? And I'm going to get into why I have some reservations about Dan McLean. But of course, he comes out saying, don't split the vote and let Gondek win. So he's spreading a little bit of fear with this message. It says, Dan McLean is counselor speaking of a big fear. The province has just rolled out rules for city-based political parties in Calgary. The election for mayor and city council in a year, and time is flying by. With an unpopular mayor and council, many people are lining up to fight City Hall. Again, part of the reason I wanted to throw my hat in the ring was it was going to be an easier battle to try and convince people that I was willing to take their vote and willing to actually make changes in the city and reduce taxes and cut ridiculous spending. There's a big fear in the mayor's race so that many people could run for the mayor that Jody Gondek or other self-styled progressives could win. What we need to do, people who call themselves center or center-right, there has to be a coming together where one person has polling and they're doing way better than everybody else. We should all follow the leader. I will We'll see if anybody else has the integrity to do the same. If you really want to see the city being run better and you don't want to see a Gondek or a Thiessen as a mayor, you'd better get behind the person the people are getting behind. Brian Thiessen is a downtown Calgary lawyer, said to be backed by Stephen Carter, the never to be underestimated political player behind the mayoral wins of Naheed Nenshi and Jody Gondek. Again, those are the kind of people that are installing our current mayors. Again, when you look at Olivia Chow, when you look at everything happening across Canada, right now, Jeff Davison, the former councillor who ran against Gondek last time and finished third, is in the running. There's Jeremy Farkas, the former councillor who was runner-up to Gondek last time. You can afford to bet a lot of money Farkas is entering the fray. Again, I do believe that's happening. I've spoke with his people multiple times, and they've kind of alluded to the same thing. And I can't speak on Farkas's behalf until he makes a formal announcement. It says there's Thiessen, and his candidacy should be official soon. There's also Sonia Sharp, a counselor who's rattled some cages at City Hall. And there's McLean, and he hasn't said no to throwing his hat into the ring. So again, when he's talking about just follow the leader, get in line, I feel like he's kind of trying to clear the deck so that he can stand out in a crowd, secure his space. I'm going to get into that again as we finish up this article. There will almost certainly be more names. Of course, we cannot write off the mayor. As the list of folks thinking about going on Gondek's job grows, McLean figures the mayor must be smiling. The more candidates, the better for her. And we often see this in municipal elections where there's 24 or so candidates to choose from because there's an outpouring of people trying to vie for that chair. The councillor says that when he's talking to individuals, they want to shrink the list. They also fear with the splitting up of the vote that many candidates Gondek could still win with a lower percentage of the vote than in the last ballot battle. They want to see a two-person race, 3 max, said McLean. We don't need a whole open field of these people who are hopefuls maybe getting 10% or 20%. Again, I agree with that statement. You know, when you look at the federal elections, you've got the major party leaders and that's it. In a civic election, you've got pretty much anybody who can get their 100 signatures and the funding to run that moves forward. So sometimes you get this overflow of people that you can't only not get educated as to who's running and what their policies are, their platforms, but it's overwhelming. So I do agree partially with that statement. By January, February, March, even if you're not resonating, if you aren't getting anywhere, do the right thing, drop out. Rick McIver is Premier Danielle Smith's point man for the cities. McIver, a former Calgary councillor, lost to Nenshi in the mayor's race of 2010, where Nenshi did not receive anywhere near a majority of the votes. Again, Mayor Nenshi's a different story because he had the Muslim vote, and I hate to say it, not to sound racist, it's just facts. There's a very large Muslim population in Calgary, and as soon as you have that vote, it's essentially a shoo-in. McIver says having candidates choose to be a part of a local political party with a plan on what they do to City Hall makes it easier for voters to choose who they want to represent them. And again, Calgary and Alberta have made it okay for people to express, well, I guess the city of Calgary, it's not really Alberta, that they're allowed to get behind a party. They're allowed to label a party, which typically isn't found in civic elections. McIver adds the vast majority of those already elected to councils don't like the idea of political parties. Nobody who is already elected and has the name recognition wants to give a newbie coming in the advantage of having, if not the name of recognition, the recognition of a platform that might be popular with the voters. So again, they're saying they don't want somebody who's underqualified coming in, getting those votes just because they resonate with a certain party. At least people should have an idea who they're voting for. At least you know what the promises are. And to that, again, I say, how are we supposed to trust, the good old boys when they've been around for so long? Keep in mind that it's not just the mayor who makes decisions when his city moves forward with their plans. These are voted on by council. What you should be doing when you're voting in your civic elections to know who you can potentially trust is look at their voting history. Look at the policies they've voted on and who voted against those policies, who voted for them. Find out which ones you agree with, which ones you disagree with to make the best educated decision you can. McIver says, I'm a conservative. Conservatives, if they are true to form, they'll form political parties. The other guys will form one and they'll win. We'll see. Jeff Davison does not fear a vote split. Davison believes the current city council has failed. He believes no one on council should be reelected. I agree with that statement. He says there are 2 parties on council, the Yes Mayor Party and the Naysayer Party. Davison doesn't think Gondek is much of a threat. Do you remember the movie Dumb and Dumber? Jim Carrey goes up to the hot girl and says, can I ask you for a date? What would be the chances? And she says, like 1 in a million. And he says, so you're saying there's a chance. Still, in McLean's big fear, he knows Davison is already in the race. What makes you think you're going to do any better this time? You split the vote last time. You're going to split the votes this time, says the counselor. Thanks, Jeff. I mean, what I have to say about Dan McLean was this is the very discussion that we had when I went to Pierre Poilievre's Stampede Breakfast. He talked to me about vote splitting. He urged me to drop out, and I listened. He says, we don't want to vote split. We don't want to cause an issue. Again, do you really think you have what it takes to get the majority vote in Calgary, to get out there, to have the volunteers, to have the manpower? And honestly, when I started to see the volunteer scale that I was already collecting, despite having funding in place, despite having very big players in the Calgary market willing to back my mayoral campaign, I listened to what Dan said, and I do agree that vote splitting is a terrible thing. I thought I was doing the just thing by saying to my family, where do you want to be at? My wife had stated small town living is better than what Calgary is right now. I don't believe that, given statistics, given the math, the numbers, that we can win without a desperate uphill battle. So I agreed. I dropped out. But one of the things that I've seen here is Dan McLean is also very heavily connected with Pierre Poilievre's brother. If you don't know already, Pierre's brother works out of City Hall in Calgary. While he is not a counselor, he is buddy-buddy with Dan McLean. And again, if Dan enters the race, I also had to look at the fact that, hey, he's funded through the Poilievres. He's going to stand a much better chance of winning an election than I would. Again, I'm wasting people's money. I'm wasting people's time. It makes sense to drop out. The problem here, I fear, is even though Dan McLean has pretty much been a naysayer as time goes on, this is where, again, when you start bringing in political parties, when you start bringing in political resemblance into civic elections, you run the risk of good old boys getting the seats, never having to fear for their jobs because, of course, they're going to get the popular vote. Nothing's going to get done. You're just going to end up with more corrupt councillors in City Hall. You're going to see people resonate with those parties amongst the candidates that are available. And again, you could either have an NDP-controlled city council, you could have a Liberal-controlled council, or you could get a Conservative-controlled council. None of them essentially offering you the solutions that are best for the city. I believed, as a separate citizen, somebody who understood what it meant to decide, do I pay my utility bills or do we put food in the fridge, would have a better understanding of what people need in this city rather than bureaucrats who sit as home builders, as accountants, as people with silver spoons who essentially have the easier life that have never had to make the difficult choices that day-to-day citizens have to make. I think this is disaster. And I think that when I've seen what goes on, the discussions that go on amongst these politicians, because I do spend a fair bit of my time chit-chatting and rubbing elbows with these guys, I think that if you're in a major city, if you're able to get out, you should do so as soon as possible, because cities like Calgary, as much as I love this city and I've been here for 30 years, I don't believe it's able to be saved. I don't think that anybody is going to come in and make the decisions that are best for its citizens. I feel that a lot of these cities are kind of going towards what's popular for their pockets rather than what's popular for the people. And civic politics, I think, are in big, big trouble. And that's a nightmare considering that civic policies are the ones that affect your life the most, whether it's, municipal, federal, or provincial. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think Dan McLean's trying to clear the deck in his favor ahead of time and scare people with fear? Or do you think he has a point when it comes to vote splitting? I feel it's kind of a 50-50 here, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think down below. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I hope to see you all at Shanks this upcoming Saturday, November 2nd, for our meet and greet with Mrs. Fringe. I think it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to seeing you. If it's your first time here, I hope this video has earned your subscription. Make sure as you're clicking that button down below, you hit the bell for notifications. Join me live here on the channel each and every Friday for Friday Night Fringe, my live streaming show, where we go over everything that's happened this week in politics, everything we know that's coming up in the weeks ahead, and some back and forth within the community, joined by my beautiful wife, Mrs. Fringe. We look forward to chatting with you guys each and every Friday night and hearing what you have to say outside of making these videos, and I look forward to seeing each of you this Friday coming up in the stream starting at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, every Friday here on the channel. I know it was a long video, but I hope you guys enjoyed it and have a great rest of your weekend. I'll catch you on the next one.